Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. The Honorable Grant Venerable joining us, our Professional of the Year. Ecstatic he's back joining us here live from California, if he's home from the holidays, which I think he is, to talk more about his amazing career, his publications, his philosophy, and so much more. How are you today, Grant?
Well, that's a good question.
Oh, no.
I'm fine. I, I had some anxious moments a few days ago that I want to at least mention.
Sure.
Some of life's adjustments, um, but all is well as I come online here.
What's going on? Do you want to share it?
Sure. Yeah. Are we live yet?
Yes, we're live, yes.
Great. About 45 years ago, I was teaching at University of California, Santa Cruz, teaching chemistry there, and had a very unusual moment. It was preparing in February of 1980 to play an organ recital at the local congregational church that I attended. And the word went out to the members of the church that they needed blood for the husband of the music department chair of the church. And would members be willing to give blood? So I presented myself as a volunteer giver of blood. And I think I had given blood before, but never had the experience that I had at that point when I was lying down on the cot with the needle attached in my arm, and they proceeded to draw blood. So you're supposed to be able to give a pint or so, and around maybe 5 minutes or so, I raised my right hand to say, "I'm getting faint here." So they pulled the needle right out. And so I didn't lose consciousness, but they did give me an opinion that the nurse did that I may not be an appropriate blood donor because I have a reaction to that, of that blood leaving my body, so much of it so quickly. And it took me several hours to recover, and then went on and played my recital the next day, but it wasn't as lively as it could have been if I had not given even that little bit of blood. Well, a similar but different thing happened last Thursday when one of my physicians wanted to get some data from a blood draw, and so it ordered certain variables to be tested. So I went into the clinic down in Yucca Valley, and there was an unusually large number of vials to fill with my blood, and it went normally the way it was supposed to, and the needle was in my arm. It must have been in there for 12 or 15 minutes. And then it was done. And then I drove home, and all was well. And that was Friday. However, Friday night, at around late Friday night, at 1 o'clock in the morning, it was by then Saturday morning, I was fast asleep and discovered that I was having a dizzy spell. And yet I was asleep. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought that the earth was spinning around me. I thought my room was spinning. So I tried to get up out of the bed, and instead I fell on the floor, right on my face. So I didn't know what was going on, but anyway, I calmed down, and it took me the rest of the day to really recover.
I'm so sorry.
So
Wow.
the topic that comes to me to talk about are that life is not entirely planned. planned out. I mean, you can plan a lot of things if you're wise enough, but sometimes you can't plan. You have to adjust to what you're experiencing. So that's what I had to do. And I'm
Ah,
still making small adjustments. And as I do that, I'm looking at life as a proactive experience rather than as a reactive experience.
yeah.
So I took
Ah,
some notes on
oh,
that
sure.
uh, to see how I could start. There's various mental portals that I can start from to get at the subject of my memoir, which is footprints in the chaotic unknown. So I'm really in kind of a chaotic unknown right now, but I've been used to that for decades and years. We left off last week with one of the great chaotic unknowns of social existence in America, at least, but in many places, and that had to do with the subject of miscegenation and talking about my
Uh-huh.
family in who were living in servitude in Kentucky and then also in Missouri. So, but there's more to add to that, and that's what I need to do today. And that has to do with the root word of miscegenation, MISC, is the root word of miscellaneous. And anyway, miscegenation is two words. It's a root word, MISC, which means mix or mixture. And then genation refers to genes. So it's a mixture of genes. Well, that's always been an important issue in the existence of living organisms, particularly thinking organisms like human beings. Uh, so people lose sight of the fact that there's actually five basic experiences that we have. And
Really?
that goes along with the five dimensions in which we live. And I talk about those dimensions in my memoir. I introduce it when I introduce the film, The Matrix, back in 1999, that my matrix, called the Venerable Matrix, or just the Ven Matrix, has five domains. And those are the domains in which we have, enjoy, or suffer from our human experiences. And the first domain introduced is domain A, and that is our physical needs, our physical resources that we need to survive and fulfill our goals in life. And then there's something that organizes those physical domains, and that's domain C. Domain B is the resource domain, and C is the organizational domain. It
Mm-hmm.
has to do with the structure in which we live in our bodies. And through that structure, we know the body knows what resources it needs to survive. Then there's another domain, a fourth domain called domain D. And domain D is that part of our structure in which we live on Earth that produces the changes that we need. And to deal with changes, such as myself with this blood test, changes that are unexpected, that
Yeah.
we then have to adjust to and make changes to do the adjustment to the
Mm-hmm.
unexpected changes. So that's four. Now, if corporate America and church organizations, community organizations, government organizations are wise, they would construct their structures to abide by the Venn matrix structure. However, they only tend to deal with three domains, namely the physical needs. So people need buildings, so they build buildings and they need equipment in the buildings. They need heaters to heat them or air conditioners to cool them. They need information. And that's domain A. And then domain C is the structural domain that links things together in the right way. And then there's the goal domain, which is domain A. And that's all that corporate America really deals with now. I think, as much as recent as 30, 40 years ago, the best corporations dealt with 4 domains that incorporated the change domain. That is, they had departments look ahead. Strategic planning is what they were called. Now there's very lightweight strategic planning, and so there's too many surprises. And the 5th domain is missing entirely now in our community and corporate and government, church, organizations. The 5th domain is what? It is it goes to the word quint. I think that's the Greek. Quint means 5. So that's the 5th domain. And we've heard of quintessence, and that is the essential essence of life. The Greeks and the Romans and other ancient peoples had elements of life: air, earth, water, and fire. But they always knew there was a 5th domain outside of the physical ones: air, earth, water, and fire. That was the quintessence. Nobody could see the quintessence,
Yeah.
but it's the soul part of the structure of life. Now, that's the nub of my memoir. It's how we deal with all those things. But more specifically, it's how my ancestors dealt with those things, and then how their descendants are dealing with them today. Well, that brings where we left off, talking about my great-great-grandmother, who was born around 1809. Well, that's a darn long time ago. But
Yeah.
I was talking about her character as a person.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we know that? We know it
Yeah.
from the oral tradition that the elders would pass down knowledge of their elders and their ancestors. Fortunately, when I was in graduate school at
Yeah.
the U Chicago in the late 60s, 65 to 70, I was only a few blocks away from the oldest person in my
Wow.
mother's branch of the family. And she lived in Hyde Park, Kenwood,
Aw.
Chicago, which is where the University of Chicago was located, just a mile south of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very fine upper middle class neighborhood with large mansion-sized homes. Well, that was my cousin Cleo, my mother's eldest first cousin. Cleo was, at the time I started graduate school in 65. She was already 70 years of age and would love to talk about her ancestors. She shared a lot with me, for which I was grateful. But I think I probably encouraged her to do that. But my younger cousins weren't that interested, because I think they felt life was a little too realistic for them because of the new social standards. I'll put new, they weren't really new, but things change. People talk about different things in different eras of human existence. So Cleo, who was already 70 years old, she talked about things she knew about. And they were not always what we call today politically correct. Political correctness is simply those pieces of information that tend to make others nervous because they don't want to hear them talked about. And that's what I left off on at our last session, namely my great-great-grandmother, who was Cleo's grandmother. And fortunately, Cleo knew this lady, Ari Scott White, who had 8 children that we could count from the records that were kept. And all 8 children, they had different fathers. Now we're talking about an earlier day in America,
Oh,
particularly for people who were in bondage. They were owned by other people of another race.
wow.
Now that's what it's considered in ways too sensitive to talk about. We don't want to talk about
Yeah.
those things. Yet it's the very thing we need to talk about to finally get through the chaotic unknowns
Yeah.
that we're struggling against today in the United States and in a few other places across the world. So that's one of the purposes of the memoir, is to get that knowledge out, to get me, get my family, to get others comfortable talking about things that are considered delicate and politically incorrect today. So I'm making them correct to talk about. And that gets into the prologue of this memoir about Aries Scott's comparative exercise of free will. Now, free will, you always have to measure by, okay, what are the social rules and expectations of human behavior around us? And Ari took a little more free will. I shouldn't say a little more. She took a lot more. And there were those women who were in the enslaved classes who did take a lot more. But
Yeah.
they did it shrewdly so that they could maximize their survival and their well-being, which is what Ari did. So she'd done what female animals have always done in selecting the mates by which to bear offspring. It
Wow.
goes back to reptiles, to
Yep.
uh, cats, bears, wild animals, but especially to people. But
Mm-hmm.
people didn't have rules of behavior
Nope.
until there
Until
was
what?
civilization.
So true,
And
right?
that brings me to the subject of, there's really 3 sets of laws that
Mm.
govern human beings. And that's
Ah,
one of the things I wanted to talk about in in
ah,
this in this
go for
interview.
it. Yeah, what are they?
Namely, it's there's 3 sets of governing laws
Mm-hmm.
among civilized human beings. And that civilized people go back about maybe several thousand years. They may have occurred in small groups of people, but they did have rules about how to dwell with one another. And and it governed laws of trade, how to trade with people that lived on the other side of the mountain where you lived.
Mm-hmm.
And there were languages that developed. And uh, so civil laws developed, the laws governing the lives of citizens of different societies. But those were not the only laws. They were, in fact, the lowest level of basic laws we had. But as we got more sophisticated as civilized people, we had laws governing everything we would experience in our lives. And that included the laws of marriage, which were some of the last laws to come about because
Yeah.
there were no marriages. Societies, rulers could determine who had the rights and privileges of marriage. And the slaves in America had no rights of
Yeah.
marriage unless they were free and lived in an environment in the nation that allowed them to have the same rights as
Mm-hmm.
other free people. So my ancestors, being from the
Mm-hmm.
deep South, but more from the border south of Kentucky and Tennessee, uh, they were denied, but Tennessee and Kentucky did not have laws against teaching slaves how to read and write and do arithmetic. This was a fortunate thing
Really?
for my mother's people
Yeah.
who came from Kentucky, because there was young Anthony, that was cousin Cleo's grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
but it was my mother's grandfather also, but my great grandfather. And he was the son of
Oh.
the people, the man that owned him in Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
It was what I developed the terminologies of less oppressive forms
Mm-hmm.
of ownership. And so I call it slavery light, because people were not beaten every week in those households. They had some modicum of decency in how they were treated. So there was little Anthony, who was the pride and joy of his father, but his mother was Ari Scott White,
Oh,
and he was maybe her middle child. And Ari Scott also had a daughter who came along a few years after Anthony,
okay.
well, a dozen years.
Oh.
She's the one that in the letters showed that that daughter named Amanda disappeared when she was about 4 years old. That's the kind of thing that happened in Kentucky and Tennessee when, because they were along the Ohio River, which was the main trading route to the
Mm-hmm.
deep south, to New Orleans. The Ohio would pour out into the Mississippi River. And there were people who wanted to buy slaves that would come up to Louisville, Kentucky, to look for some people to buy or to steal. And that was the fear, is that little Amanda may have been stolen with her mother, Lucy Scott, who's telling this story in the letters that she has written. So Lucy was the first one to leave the South, the Kentucky. She went briefly through Topeka along with her other siblings, but she kept going. I think something really traumatized her when she was a little girl in Kentucky, and that's why I speculate she may have been headed for an auction block, but somehow freed herself, or was freed by somebody, so she was able to survive. But she was the first one to move away from Kansas and got into Denver, Colorado for a few years, and then moved to California, Los Angeles, somewhere around between 1900 and 1910. I believe that is why once my grandpa, James Scott, who was the oldest of the Scott siblings and the oldest of Ari's grandchildren, he followed Ari to live in Los Angeles. But his five sisters and brothers stayed in Topeka or lived in Chicago and other places like Omaha, Nebraska, and in Minnesota. So that's just some basic building blocks of the knowledge that's in this memoir. That brings us back to the laws. Laws evolved to usually try to help people, but in other instances, after slavery was over, Southern states put in laws to try to hold on to people to be almost still in slavery and made them sharecroppers. And they had to get loans because they weren't paid enough money, but they got their loans of food and things from the store of the people that were that ran the sharecropping business. So they could never really get freedom entirely. Fortunately, my Kansas ancestors didn't have to go through that because they escaped to Kansas Topeka, Kansas. That takes us uh, to the adventures of those people in the memoir and how they developed such diverse descendants with all the careers that we've had that are noted in this prologue. I left off last time talking about a big issue in this society, and it's because of the economic changes. In that, when I was a youngster, all the way until I was in my 30s, the corporate America was much more aligned with democracy than it became later, especially now. And we've all heard the term billionaire oligarchs, where money is everything. They live for money above all else. And so even the boards of directors of corporations are changed in their whole purpose, their sense of purpose, and that they're not as interested in doing the right thing for their employees. They want to hold on to money so that the shareholders of the corporations are the ones that are rewarded with enormous profits. So all that is getting its start here in the uh, prologue of this book. And the prologue isn't that long, but it is that important. But it's there where this idea of victimization starts to get recognized and sorted out. Well, with slavery, it was easy. You were a victim if you were owned by someone, and you were fortunate if you were owned by someone who at least treated you with a modicum of decency, but not everyone was treated decently. And so that made them more victimized than those who were treated decently. You can only imagine the impact on me as a descendant of that system, what it would have been like for my growing up and realizing my ambitions had I come up under a more oppressive system of owners, the people that owned my great grandparents and great greats and great 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 grandparents. And I'm so grateful how I did manage to grow up in a fairly free society where I had more free will. And I early on developed an idea of what I wanted to do when I grew up. It was a question that my family would ask us kids all the time. Well, what do you want to be? And my brother wanted to be a farmer. He wanted to be a fireman or a farmer. My sister wanted to be a cabin attendant on an airplane. I wanted to be an engineer like my daddy,
Wow.
my Caltech raised daddy. But we were
Aw.
encouraged to exercise
Mm-hmm.
our vision. And vision is the very
Yeah.
basis of realizing where you're going to wind up. Even if you don't get to go there as soon as you hope, which was my case. But
Yep.
I did pretty well. And that gets us to not just the Venn matrix, but the Lloyd Williams spheres of experience. Now,
Yep.
Lloyd Williams is an old friend of mine who is a master psychologist of Carl Jung psychology, and he developed a similar structure as my Venn matrix, but his was about the human experiences that live in my Venn matrix domains. So there's five of his spheres, five Williams spheres. I remember, I can memorize them easily because there's an I, an E, and three S's. And the first I is the intellect, the intellectual. The second one is an E. It's the emotional.
Wow.
I don't
Yeah.
mean necessarily being upset emotionally, but I mean the emotional intelligence that works in our lives to
Mm-hmm.
give us good intuition and creative insight. Then the three S's are S for
Mm-hmm.
spirituality and sexual, the
Yeah.
sexual experience S, and the social experience S. So all of those experiences have to work together in order to have a full experience of life. Now, that doesn't always happen or consistently, but you hope to maintain a happy norm. And that's why we have counselors in our lives. We have people in the psychology profession that we can consult as therapists, which I did.
Yeah.
And uh, I guess it's because my parents consulted therapists. In fact, their entire social group in Los Angeles, who were prominent people in
Mm-hmm.
the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity and the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority and the Links Incorporated, all of these were social support groups in
Yeah.
particularly the African American community of Southern California, then across the nation. And I remember when one of those groups brought a very noted psychiatrist from back east. She was a Dr. Logan, and my parents were always careful to tell us. I mean, we were, I guess, only 5, 6, or 7 years old, and they would say, "Well, Dr. Logan is coming over to talk to Daddy and Mommy today, so you have to go back and into your rooms and just be quiet until Dr. Logan finishes talking to us." So that was a regular ritual for maybe a whole year or so. But what did it do? It it gave us an example that psychotherapy is intended to be a very important activity to uh, subject yourself to improve the quality of your existence, particularly the relationships that you're trying to develop, whether they be with close friends, with spouses, with relatives, with people that you're in business with, that you work with on the job. So that that was gave me a sense of friendliness and at easiness about. So by the time I was a professional as a professor, I discovered, I think I've mentioned to you, professoring can be a very political activity. By political, I mean it's very people intense. Political, pol is, it means people in Greek. And uh, and then I had experiences with psychotherapy in Santa Cruz when I taught there. Also, when I moved to the Bay Area. So that's just an aside, so that I could get to where I need to get here.
You
Um,
have a lot. Okay.
yes, um, a lot of what I have to talk about is from this prologue called "Claiming Self-Agency."
Mm-hmm.
In my case, claiming my self-agency, claiming the power to
Yeah.
envision how I want my life to be, have a vision of what a
Uh,
job looks like. Not just go in and get a job just to get a salary, but what it looks like, how does it taste? How does it smell? How does it sound? How does it look?
yeah.
How does it feel? Uh,
Uh,
that's different from
uh,
what chattel slaves
yeah.
have to deal with. Chattel slaves means slavery that's in the interest of earning a profit, a corporate profit. That's what plantation owners had to do. And so their servants were chattel. Um, there was a sense of victimization that developed then. Uh, it is only human to be seduced by
Yep.
the illusion of limitation, fear, hatred, violence, and victimization as both self-fulfilling prophecy and prevailing truth. It goes without saying that maintaining the victim illusion has been a primary interest of the mass media industry, especially during national election campaigns. The illusion obscures the empowering alternative of creating one's reality from higher and better illusions. After all, an idea, a pure idea, is just a form of an illusion. This is a vision of seeing things as we freely choose them to be, as if they are already true. Unrealistic fantasy, some would object, but this was the logic of Lucy Scott's prophetic Christianity of loving one's neighbor as oneself. It was a logic of living in the moment and the logic of a faith in a larger love of self and one's neighbor. That's the old Jewish law that came from like 4,000 years ago. And then the Christians recodified it in the time of Christ around the first year AD. It was the logic of paradox that it was true for my ancestors. It led to an unanticipated blessings and protections from harm arising from their fundamental trust in and openness to life in a transcendent reality. It is true for me today. The complex character of the family's history is evident in the complex character of Lucy Scott, born in 1780s Virginia.
Okay.
The ripening of this complexity with Ari
Yep.
Scott in early 1800s Kentucky
Ugh.
makes a quiet but significant turning away from a mindset of victimization as an inevitable defining consciousness and way of life. Now, right away, a lot of my friends and colleagues and academe would say, well, that's not reasonable. However, in their
Yeah.
less oppressive servitude in adjoining Kentucky counties, Ari and her mother Lucy were among the first of my known ancestral
Yeah.
kinfolk to take the responsibilities and risks for creating their life experience as they wished it to be, however different from prevailing social expectations. Their example is an empowering vision for both historically and presently oppressed people, and they know who they are. People whose wages are too low to only work one job. You have to have several jobs now to survive. That's oppression, and it makes them feel like victims. The Scots and the Venerables of Kentucky represent a defining moment for one African American extended family. And there are thousands of others
Mm-hmm.
whose stories cry out to be told. Some have already been told,
Yeah.
like Isabel Wilkerson's book.
Yeah.
Theirs was a defining moment that propelled the upward march of their descendants from slavery into
Mm-hmm.
middle and upper middle class post 19th century
Wow.
enclaves from
Wow.
Missouri and Kansas to Illinois, California, and beyond. And theirs was a bright example of transcending the color
Mm-hmm.
line and embracing life experience as it was, the good and the sordid.
Ah.
It was their entry point to inner peace
Yeah.
and fulfillment in a chaotic and imperfect world,
Ah.
irrespective of adversity. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really an important jumping off point for our listeners to replace, and I call it what it is, the illusion of victimization by what we can call a higher and better illusion. That sounds almost humorous.
Yeah.
To It's really acknowledging something that psychologists like Carl Jung have attempted to teach their patients, that whatever it is afflicting you emotionally and even has physical consequences, you can deal with your mind,
Yeah.
as Lloyd Williams says, with his five uh, spheres of human existence, five
Mm-hmm.
spheres of experience. So I want everyone to hear that,
Yeah.
um, the illusion that we've tended to adopt, which is victimization.
Mm-hmm.
And then others in the academic world will say, well, that was for real. Yes, it is real. But that
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean you have to put it in your soul and worship it as your God.
Yeah.
Literally, I mean that, as your God. Victimization becomes your God if you let it be. Or you could swap it out
Mm-hmm.
and make an empowering illusion where you see your children in
Yeah.
their adult lives living in a way successfully that you may not have achieved, but you're still working toward it. That's what the memoir is about. It's
Mm.
not about avoiding the sordid facts of life. It's about my discussing some sordid consequences that I got over. It's
Yeah.
what Henry Louis Gates talks about on Finding Your Roots, is how people made a way to success, happiness, joy, prosperity out of no way.
Yeah.
You do it by
Yeah.
learning how to remanipulate, reframe how your mind looks at life. You
Yeah.
reframe it. You have the freedom to do it. No one's stopping you. Just do it and sit down and draw a picture of it if you have to.
Yeah.
Well, where do we go from there, Jill? Any thoughts come up?
Well, I just can't believe. I mean, by the way, everything that we're speaking about, is all of this part of your memoir, except the latest things that we're speaking
Yes,
of?
even down to the last chapter.
Wait, how long, how big of, how many pages is this?
Well, I don't want to scare people, but it's for about uh, including index, each volume is 350 pages. So
Wow.
you're looking at a 1,400
God
page
bless you.
literary
Amazing.
work. But the last
Yeah.
chapter is about my even questioning if I even succeeded,
Oh my
if I
gosh.
had enjoyed happiness as I wanted.
Oh
Then
my
I had
gosh.
to confess I did. There were times I got discouraged. I don't want to hold that back from the reader. I want to
Yeah.
share with the reader how I turned it around, how I did what was considered a defiance of what we consider reality. How dare you do that? Most people aren't as fortunate as you. I ran across that in the schools where I had been a teacher and administrator, in which some other teachers would say, well, you have to understand, Dr. Venerable, our students aren't as smart as you are. I said, nonsense. They're open, free little minds if you give them a chance to know they're free to think and envision the future they wish to enjoy without having all of the negatives of what others suffered from thrown at them.
Yeah.
And those things did happen. It happened to friends of my family,
Mm-hmm.
people who lost homes and floods and hill caves in and fires. But what did they do? They turned around and put it all back together and built back better than before. But they were people who came from ancestors like my parents did.
Yeah.
And they had that vision of themselves, of their own inner power, their own inner vision to create what they wanted to create. I didn't know I was going to be a leader of universities. When I entered UCLA as an undergrad, I didn't even envision myself as being a professor when I finished school. But I do know I wanted to be an engineer like my dad and get a good job in mechanical engineering. But as I discovered my aptitude, my ability, what I really liked was in the area of atoms and molecules, in chemistry, chemical reactions. And that was showing up even when I was 16 years old. My father saw that. He knew it. I didn't see myself that way, but he did. I was the one that would go to the big hardware stores in Los Angeles because he would take us there once a week just so his kids could look at the various items and play around in our minds of what can we do with these things? And that's when I purchased about 10 solar cells. They were only about yay big. And they were cells I attached to a block of wood and put that wood block on a pole and erected that pole on the roof of the family house. Now, there's all kinds of stories told about people that do well in science and what they did as little children. And every, great chemist and physicist uh, did something like that as children. Many of my classmates at UCLA in chemistry, one of them loved to blow up tree stumps. So he learned how to make explosives. Another one learned how to make wine as a teenager. Another one
Wow.
learned how to do other things with chemicals. He learned, and so these were kids that became successful
Yeah.
in school and as adults in their careers. And many became professors. What did I do? I was going up on the roof, risking
Of course you were. Yep.
my hind end, not erect this pole up there and to attach a wire from the cells down in my bedroom and put the other end of the wire into a beaker of water to see what would happen. And it electrolyzed the water and created things that you get from water, like hydrogen gas,
Yeah.
oxygen gas, hydroxide ion, protons, that is the key feature of acids, hydroxide, the key feature of a base. And that's what my doctoral dissertation was on at the University of Chicago, except I had graduated to a place
Yeah.
more sophisticated than going to the hardware store to buy solar cells. I got myself into a program at the Argonne National Laboratory
Wow.
where I utilized the high energy accelerators that accelerated electrons to near the speed of light, where they had an energy of like 15 million electron volts per electron. Well, that's a high
Yeah.
energy. I mean, you could tell just from the millions. And when you aim those beams at a beaker of water or some kind of cell, which is what I did, it created other kinds of compounds in that water. And I would use those compounds to react with cobalt cyanide compounds. And then I would determine properties about what I was able to create. And I created cobalt cyanide complexes with a very short half-life, about 6 millionths of a second. And I wrote my 78-page dissertation based on those experiments. So, I said to myself in the conclusion of the memoir, it's like, how did I do that? What was going on? What did I implement in my life? What did I do with my brain to be able
Yeah.
to do that? But I did. And I realized I did really good.
Sure did.
So what do you think of all this now that we
I
had this
can't.
conversation?
There's so much. I mean, from your accident this weekend to your to everything else.
Yes.
Life is filled
Yeah.
with so much. And something about you that I've taken away because I've gotten to know you just by listening to you a lot. It's just that you really seem, if I put words in your mouth, but to have lived a full life, and you don't. You're not stopping. You've done so much, and you continue to do so much. People who may, retire from their regular job may just sit back, relax, and veg out. You are still working so hard, and with your wisdom, with your knowledge, with your intelligence, I can't even keep up. I don't know if I'm going to be like this when I'm
Oh,
your age. You clearly just you make me tired in a good way. Like you're nonstop.
indeed.
No,
Really.
but this is a
Yeah.
great thing. And it's funny because I was watching this and you are not that old, but I'm just saying, as we age, I just watched a thing with Dick Van Dyke. He's 100 and he's like,
Yes.
what he's amazing. He's just like, what the one thing my secret to success of living long is like, I think because I'm not an angry person. I don't hate and I don't have anger. And he keeps himself busy all the time because he just loves life.
Yes.
And you seem like one of
Yeah.
those people that love life and you're not going to stop or retire just because your office job retired in a sense, right? Your day job, you continue to thrive.
Right.
And that's beautiful. I really believe that. People out there can be inspired from this, whether they're into the same things that you are or not. But to read your memoirs and say, wow, this guy has done a lot, continues to do so much. I wish I could do 1/30th of what this man's done and I'd feel accomplished. But seriously, I commend you on that. What does your
Well,
family think
I'm
about
here.
this? What does your sister think about all this?
Well, I think, well, it's something I moved to this area of the world to be able to do more of. And it's like my podcasting has gracefully transmitted from talking to the students at Caltech over the last 3 years who
Yeah.
applied to live in the residence hall named after my dad. So they're
Mm-hmm.
living in the Grant D. Venerable house on the
Yeah.
Caltech, in the middle of the Caltech campus. But
Wow.
it's so energizing to me to be around them because they're told I'm coming, my sister and brother are coming for dinner. And this was Friday over a week ago. My sister and brother couldn't go to that one, but I
Yeah.
did. And the youngsters, by youngsters, I mean, they're anywhere from 17 to like 23 years of age. And they show, demonstrate excitement. Oh, this son of who Venerable House is named after is coming to have dinner with us. And they had a wonderful dinner that night where the institution lets them have extra budget. Like, so our budget bought us a beef Wellington to eat.
Yeah.
And of course, that has these lovely veggies in the croissant that the
Oh,
Wellington is wrapped in with this delicate tasting sauce. And then a dessert, a lava cake, or a chocolate lava cake that is such a delicate, it's a round little uh, cake, not quite like a donut, but it's soft, it's delicious. And then it had two little raspberries at the bottom, covered
mm,
with sauce that was so delicate and flavor. It just set off the beef Wellington. perfectly. So these students are living. They're living as well
Yeah,
as any billionaire household
so true.
youngsters live. And but they really wanted to hear what I had to say.
Yeah, amazing.
And that's what, that thrilled me. They're asking questions. And I'm giving, reflections on how did I grow up? See, I wanted to go to Caltech, but I couldn't get in. When I didn't have high enough SAT scores.
Really?
But, that's all. I testified to that in my conclusion that was I really successful? I didn't get into a lot of schools I wanted to go to,
Yeah,
but life, if you're open to it, dishes you up to something better. While I didn't go to Caltech like one of my best friends at a neighboring high school in Los Angeles, I went to the best place that I needed to be to develop the intellectual stamina I hadn't yet built.
yeah,
And that's what happened. So it enabled me to get into the graduate school that I felt I wanted to get to. So that's it in a nutshell. It's
well, thank you. Always a pleasure, Grant. And we unfortunately have to wrap
right.
it up. Let us know, I should say, how we can reach out to you, please. Thank you. Ah,
We'll try the website at
yep.
grantdvenerable PhD
Mm-hmm.
all .com, all lowercase, and you'll find it up there somewhere. And the book was mentioned, Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown. It's really sharing with people about their own footprints. Most of us have 2 feet that make footprints in the time space in which we live. So the idea is to make a significant footprint that the young can follow from there. So that's been my hope. It's still my hope. But there's more on that. So I didn't know we were going to talk about all these things, but
Mm-hmm.
they just congealed in my mind once we got started. And
Yeah,
that was very thrilling.
good. Well, thank you so much, Grant. And we'll talk again next week before the big holiday. And happy Hanukkah to those out there celebrating. Happy holidays upon us, almost Christmas.
Okay.
And we'll talk next week. Thank you again.
Okay. Happy holiday to you. All
You
right.
too, sweetheart. Thank
Okay,
you.
Jill.
Bye
All
bye.
right.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her?
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge?
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend?
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.